The Catholic Echo Podcast is a weekly podcast discussing what's happening now in the Catholic Diocese of Youngstown. Bishop David Bonner and members of our diocesan community discuss your burning spiritual questions. The Catholic Echo Podcast is produced by the Communications Department of the Diocese of Youngstown, with support from the Annual Diocesan Appeal. It can be found on catholicecho.org, Facebook, and YouTube. Your host is Dennis Biviano.
Hello and welcome to the Catholic Echo Podcast. Today we are answering the question, what is a deacon and how can you recognize one? Joining us to answer that question and much more is Deacon William Bancroft, the Diocesan Director of Safety Services and Permanent Diaconate, and Deacon Sylvester Frazzini. Both serve at Saint Columba Cathedral Parish. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Let's start off with Deacon Bill. Tell us a little bit about yourself and when you got involved in your current ministry.
Well, we were ordained in 2019, so we've been at this over, the sixth year, but I would never have imagined how diverse it is and how different it is from when we started. Because it is a little bit of a journey, it took us a number of years to get through formation. Once we were ordained, COVID hit. We were ordained for 6 months, and then things were upside down for a couple of years, and you just had to adjust on the fly, do what you could.
And you had a very interesting career prior to this.
Absolutely, yeah. I was in the State Highway Patrol in Ohio for 29 years. So I retired in 2017 and was ordained in 2019. Now that I'm retired, I have 10 million jobs.
Including safety here at the Diocese?
Including safety here at the Diocese, which is a big one.
Now, Deacon Syl, we talked about this episode, floated around this idea several months ago. Let's start off by answering the question, what is a deacon and what types of deacons are there?
That's a great question. As far as deacons, there's two types of deacons that we have. There's the transitional deacons, which are the seminarians that are ordained as deacons, transitional deacons that ultimately will probably be ordained priests, and that's usually for a period of 1 year. From there's permanent deacons, which Deacon Bill and I are both. Generally, it's men that have not gone into the ministry of priest, that are laity that decide for whatever reason, whether they're called or whether they feel it's the next natural step in their faith life, to become deacons and to serve people of God and to serve the parishes to the best of their ability in a very, very specified role.
And the Diocesan Pastoral Associate, that's a new term that's being thrown around here. Can you explain to our audience how that differs from a permanent deacon?
The biggest difference is that as a permanent deacon, we do help, but we're not primarily focused on the day-to-day operation of the managerial side of a church. The pastoral associate is basically a manager. Don't want to use the wrong term, but what they do is they manage the day-to-day functionality of the church. Obviously, those people are not ordained. As deacons, we are ordained, and we have parts in the liturgy and other things as well that pastoral associate does not necessarily have.
And that's a position we're going to see continue to grow in future.
That's correct, yes.
How do you recognize a deacon? Are your vestments different from a regular priest?
They are. We wear deacon stole, which is different than a priest stole. And then on top of that, at times we wear a
Dalmatic.
That's right. All I could think of was chasuble. Priests wear the chasuble. No sleeves. It's just like a poncho type thing. The deacons, there's sleeves on them. But when your arms are down, you really can't tell the difference. A lot of times, even now after Mass, a lot of people will come up to me and say, "Nice Mass, Father."
It happens all the time.
It does.
And those garments get a little hot. The actual historical significance of the dalmatic is that it's a Romanian outer garment is where it comes from historically. So they get a little bit warm. So if you see anyone with sleeves on, it looks like a priest, but they have arms, it's a deacon.
Yeah, and their face is red.
Now, what are some of your main duties as a permanent deacon? I guess how does that role differ from that of a priest?
Well, we're basically assigned by the bishop wherever he believes that we're needed to help priest or parish or worship site is where we get assigned. Now, Bishop Bonner is pretty adamant about not assigning deacons at the place, parish, church, worship site where they came from. And that's for a lot of different reasons. So you serve the greater church, you serve the people of God, not necessarily those who you know. It's very rewarding.
This question goes out to both of you. We'll start with Deacon Syl, but how do you balance your ministry with family life and other work? I know you're in sales.
It's trying to be very good at scheduling. The only way to do it is to just be master of your calendar. And if you go into it, and my wife and I schedule time for us to be together and step back. We schedule family time. We schedule family dinners. First Sunday of every month to have our daughters and their husbands and our grandchildren over to make sure that we're focusing on those types of things. And just, you have to be adamant about the schedule. And unfortunately, some things go sideways with that. But, with work and with family and with church, That's what keeps you sane. That's what keeps you going. That's what keeps us able to do the things we can do, is by just being masters of our own schedules.
Absolutely.
Same question.
Yeah, your family's first, and you have to prioritize your calendar accordingly. So you don't want to shortchange your family with things. Oh, where's Dad at this week or whatever, and we never see him. You don't want to get to that point. So, like Sil said, just put everything on the calendar, and if it's not on the calendar, it doesn't exist. So it's just a way to manage your time.
I also wanted to ask you what your prayer life is like. Do you have a routine like priests would as well?
Absolutely. Every day you get up, do morning prayer. Everything through the day, you could do different things. It's nice to calm yourself, and even at the end of a busy day before you go to bed, do evening prayer, night prayer, as we're supposed to. It just makes a big difference, a huge difference in your life.
How would you say your spiritual life has changed since your ordination?
I think I rely on prayer, and I realize that there's a lot of things that I just can't make happen, and that I've got to rely and trust in God a lot more than I ever thought I would. You always hear about people saying that you need to let go, and we do need to let go, but I think all of us have this part where we hold on to things. And as I have transitioned in my tenure as a deacon, with all the changes and all the things that are going on, I would tell you that my spiritual life has become very deeper because I've let go of more things. I realize there's just things that I can't impact. There's things that I can't change, that I just have to, lack of better words, I just have to deal with. And a lot of times you can't do that unless you are deeply involved in prayer. I've come to appreciate the office of readings, the morning and evening prayer that we actually have as part of our vows for deacons to do every day. I think when I first started reading morning and evening prayer, I was confused and didn't know what was going on, and flipping around in a book, and oh my gosh, where do I read? Where do I stand? Where do I sit? But since then, in learning that, it has become a real part of my day-to-day life. It's become very important to me in the morning and the evenings to start and end with that. And I find myself praying more during the day, just as I'm driving around in my sales job in quiet time, and just taking every moment that I can in quiet and peace to be with the Lord and to pray and to surrender that day to God.
Same question.
Deacon Sil and I are both type A personalities, so in order to switch from that to the role of a deacon in the prayer life, it's like I won't say it's a 180, but it is, you have to step back and realize that you're not in charge. And that's a nice thing. It's a comforting thing that God's always there. You're always talking to him. It just, once you realize that, it gets a lot of stress off you.
And to both of you as well, what are some of the biggest challenges facing permanent deacons today?
Well, the commitment, I think. Everybody's busy. A lot of people have families. Very shortly we should be releasing some details for formation. We'll be doing that very shortly here in the next couple of months. But life is different now. It just seems like everybody's got 3 or 4 jobs and go in different directions. And it's hard to make that huge commitment for down the road, but it is very rewarding. It's not for everybody, but there's a lot of people that could do the job. We need them.
And especially, we had some changes that were announced in early July, priest assignment, deacon assignment. Are those could be some challenges for some folks?
It is, and you get used to a group of people, and as deacons, we want to be able to minister to the people in our very best ability. And a lot of times when you have just interactions at church just before, just after, given the fact that Deacon Bill and I both are going to be covering 7 churches, it's a lot to get to know the people. And that's an enormous challenge. It's great to be able to serve in the ministry of the liturgy. It's one of the 3 pillars of the diaconate, but it's also difficult to get to know the other people and everything that's going on. I think one of our challenges also is I'm not sure that everyone really understands us, because right now you have churches that never have had deacons. You have other churches that have had deacons that have done the same thing for periods of time, and now all of a sudden we're kind of moving around. So I think another challenge is getting accepted into that. We obviously want to do whatever we can to be accepted into that. And I think my message to everyone is understanding, specifically with liturgy, we don't make anything up. Everything that we do is prescribed specifically by Mother Church, whether it's in the Roman Missal, whether it's in canon law. We don't show up and say, oh, I'm going to do this because I feel like doing it today. Everything that we do is prescribed, literally every action in the Roman Missal, in the general instructions for the Roman Missal, and we follow those. And if you don't understand that and you haven't read that, you may see us doing something and someone go, hey, wait a minute, somebody else should be doing that, shouldn't be a deacon, when in reality we're doing what we're directed to do and what is proper in the eyes of the church. That becomes challenging, I think, for everybody involved, because we're obviously there to serve. We don't want people to feel bad when we do things that maybe they've done before. But at the same time, we have to make sure that we're following the instructions and everything that's put out there by Mother Church to follow what is in front of us.
Ever get nervous at Mass still? Say, with the Chrism Mass is a big Mass that everybody is there. Ever get nervous at all?
Every time, yeah. The Holy Spirit guides and directs you. So unless you put your arms to the sky and raise your head and say, oh, nobody's going to know if something is a little bit different or whatever. But we do it a lot in his Master of Ceremonies. So we do a lot of that for the bishop. And it's just a different role. It is. But you know what you have to do, and you do it.
I've almost thrown up a couple times. Yeah. I mean, seriously, when you get into Holy Week and you're an MC in front of everybody with the bishop, and these are very important masses, and I have always thought about being able to show people behind the scenes. I mean, we start literally the night before and several hours before that comes together. Yeah. There's times, I know at the most recent priest ordination, right beforehand, it was like being in high school before a football game. I mean, you have the butterflies, like it's getting ready to start, and specifically as a deacon in the role of serving others, you don't want to mess up, not because of you. I don't care about me so much. I don't want to do something that causes somebody else to possibly mess up. And there's a lot of, even though everything's detailed out, it's an awful lot of detail to follow. So, yes, I get nervous all the time. I even, if I'm at a different church I'm singing for the bishop, sometimes I even just get a little that butterfly before I even pull in the parking lot. It's like, here we go.
Yeah. I think if you don't get nervous, though, there's something wrong.
Exactly. Deacon Bill, I just want to ask you your advice for, future deacons or those who are going along the process right now.
Yeah, it's just definitely discerning a call from God. It's not for everybody, but if you think you want to be involved more in the church and have a role, there's a place because we need deacons. We really do. There's a lot of priests that need help, and we can use deacons, good qualified deacons.
We need more hands and feet.
Absolutely,
and we can use them. And I guess what I would tell people is that you hear from deacons a lot of times that someone asked them to be a deacon. That's not a pre-qualification of being deacons. Sometimes it's just the next step in your faith journey of where you're going. All of it comes down to that prayer life and discerning on your own of whether or not they should take that step. And my advice to anyone that's even thought about it for a second, explore it. It's that whole seek and it will be found, knock and the door will be opened. If you've thought about it, talk to somebody about it. And don't look at the internet. Talk to somebody that's currently a deacon that's in that role. Don't talk to a secretary, though they may have some good information. Go to the source. Go to people that are doing it. Ask them the hard questions. Ask them what you're thinking about it because you want to know. Because if that little bit of that little spark is in there that you've thought about it, there's probably a raging fire that's going to come behind it, and you need to explore that. You owe it to yourself. You owe it to your family. You owe it to God to explore it. And that way you know either way. If you explore it and you're like, nope, this isn't for me, at least you know. If you explore it and this is for you, well, then you also know. It can be followed by a lot of work, but you will also know what the right way to go is.
Yeah, a lot of work. It's good, though. Yeah, just get involved in your church more and more and more. And after a while, people will just start out, do you ever think about being a deacon? It's like all of a sudden, these people come up to you randomly and just say that, ask you that. It's like, well, I guess I have. It's kind of interesting how it goes.
Last question I want to ask you. I know you're part of a lot of funeral masses. What would you say to folks are some important do's and don'ts for those attending a Catholic funeral mass?
I think it starts with the calling hours. I think one of the biggest things to recognize is that, number one, I know there's some dialogue about having calling hours in the churches right now. I know they're talking about that. But as a Catholic, if we're going to Catholic calling hours, we need to be examples to other people because we know the Eucharist is there. We know the tabernacle is there. We need to be respectful. We shouldn't be carrying on. We shouldn't be, eating our dinner. We shouldn't be, putting refuse every place. We need to be respectful and be that example. We don't need to tell people, hey, look, Jesus is over there in the tabernacle, but we need to act that way and be an example for everyone else. I think secondly, with the amount of people that everyone knows in such a close community, you have a lot of people at calling hours. And I think it's important to make sure that when you're going through, out of respect for the family, you want to offer your condolences. That's very, very important. But that's not the time to start talking about stories and other things as well, because there's other people behind you waiting. The family needs to get a chance to see everybody. And anyone that's gone through that knows that gets pretty grueling after a couple hours of standing there. Yes, you do want to accept those condolences, but you also want to keep it moving. Yeah. As far as the Mass, I would say, serving as a deacon, we have the same parts within the Mass of Christian burial. But I think the biggest part is that when we're doing that, it's great to see other participating Catholics that are there because we know that they're going to respond. And a lot of time, the families, they're grieving. They're not really necessarily totally focused on Mass, but I guess the ask on that one is if you're Catholic and you're going to a Catholic funeral, respond, do the responses, be a little bit louder in your response to know that, number one, that the family is supported by you being there and that thunderous response, but also to help cover for them as well. And it's really great to have active participating Catholics at those types of masses because they need your help. The family needs your help. The priest needs your help. Everybody needs their help to do that part of the liturgy.
And you could be a leader for the congregation, too.
Okay, thank you so much, Deacon Sylvester Frazzini and Deacon William Bancroft. You have contact in case folks want to get in touch.
They can call me at the office. The number is 330-744-8451, and I'm at extension 369. If they want to view the website, Diocese of Youngstown, there's a section in there for the diaconate, and my email address is wbancroft@youngstowndiocese.org.
Thank you both for your insight. That is it for this week's episode of the Catholic Echo podcast. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook, CatholicEcho.org, or your favorite podcasting platform. I'm your host, Dennis Biviano. Thanks for listening, and have a blessed week.
The Catholic Echo podcast is a production of the Roman Catholic Diocese of Youngstown. Have a blessed day, and may God be with you.